are things in the Japanese mountains that have no name in English. Things that the old stories warn you about, but never quite describe. My grandfather used to say that winter does not kill you with cold alone. It sends something, someone. I was 22, the year I learned he was right. It was January 1978. I was working as a woodcutter in a small village in the mountains of Hokkaido, the northern island, the coldest part of Japan. My partner was an older man named Mosaku. He had worked those forests for 40 years. His hands were like tree bark, and he never spoke more than 10 words in a day. But the words he did speak, I should have listened to. We had gone deep into the forest that morning to fell old cedar. The weather was clear when we started. Blue sky, sharp air, the kind of winter day that makes you grateful to be alive. But the mountains have their own weather, and by late afternoon, the sky had turned the color of old iron. Snow began to fall. Not gentle snow, not the pretty flakes that children catch on their tongues. This was snow with intention, thick, driving, horizontal. Within an hour, we could see 10 feet in front of us. Mosaku grabbed my arm. His grip was stronger than I expected. "The hut," he said, "now." There was an old trapper's hut about a mile east. We barely made it before the storm became a wall of white. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and the cold was so deep, it felt like it was pressing on my chest from the inside. We built a small fire in the center of the dirt floor and wrapped ourselves in everything we had. Mosaku fell asleep first. I stayed awake a little longer, watching the fire, listening to the wind. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. The fire was dead. The hut was dark. So dark I couldn't see my own hands, but I could see the door, and someone was standing in it. She was tall, taller than any woman I had ever seen. Her skin was white, not pale, but white like fresh snow, white like paper, white like something that had never been touched by sunlight. Her hair was long and black and moved, as if underwater, even though there was no wind inside the hut. She wore a white kimono that seemed to glow with its own light, and her eyes were the color of ice on a deep lake, pale blue and entirely without warmth. She did not walk. She floated. Her feet never touched the ground. I tried to scream, but the air had frozen in my throat. I tried to move, but my body was not my own anymore. I could only watch as she bent over Mosaku. She leaned close to his face, so close their lips almost touched, and she breathed into him. A single, slow, visible breath, white vapor that passed from her mouth into his. Mosaku's skin turned gray, then blue, then white. Frost spread across his face like lace being woven by invisible hands. And I knew with absolute certainty that he was dead. Then she turned to me. She floated toward where I lay paralyzed on my mat, and the cold rolled ahead of her like a wave. When she was directly above me, she tilted her head. A slow, curious movement, like a child examining something strange and small. "You are young," she said. Her voice was not a voice. It was the sound of snow falling on snow. It was the crack of ice on a frozen lake. It was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "I will spare you for now, because you are young and because youth does not last." She leaned closer and I could smell her, not perfume, not rot, but the clean, sharp, empty smell of a world without life, without warmth, without anything. "But you must never tell anyone what you saw tonight. Not your mother, not your wife, not your children. If you tell, I will find you, and I will not be merciful twice." She withdrew. The door closed by itself. The fire ignited by itself. And when dawn came, I was still lying on my mat, stiff with cold, alive only by the mercy of something that did not understand mercy. Mosaku was found frozen, his body a statue of ice, his eyes wide open. They said it was the cold, just the cold, and I let them believe it. For 20 years I kept my promise. I married. Her name was Yuki. a coincidence that I told myself meant nothing. She was beautiful and quiet and came from a village in the north that she never talked about. She gave me 3 children, and in all those years she never seemed to age. Not a single gray hair, not a single line on her face. One winter night, after the children were asleep, we sat by the fire. The snow was falling outside. Thick, heavy, the kind of snow we had not seen since that night and something loosened in my chest. Something that had been locked tight for 20 years. I told her everything. About the storm, about the hut, about the woman in white who breathed death into Mosaku and mercy into me. When I finished, the fire flickered. Yuki stood up very slowly. Her face did not change expression, but her skin began to glow. That same pale, impossible white that I had tried to forget for 2 decades. "You fool," she said, her voice no longer warm, no longer human. "I was the woman in the snow. I let you live because you were young and beautiful, and because I wanted to know what it felt like to be human. And you swore to me that you would never tell." Tears streamed down my face, not from fear, from the sudden, crushing understanding that I had been living with a predator for 20 years, and I had loved her, and she had loved me, in whatever way a creature like her could love. "I should kill you now," she said. "And I would, if not for our children. They are innocent. They do not deserve to wake up without a father or a mother." She walked, floated, toward the door. "But if you ever harm them, or neglect them, or let a single tear fall from their eyes that you could have prevented, I will return, and I will show you what winter really feels like." She opened the door. The snow swallowed her instantly, as if she had never been there at all. Our youngest daughter has her mother's eyes, pale blue, the color of ice on a deep lake. She has never been sick. She has never felt cold. And sometimes, when the snow falls heavy at night, she stands at the window and smiles, as if someone is waving to her from the darkness. My grandmother told me 3 things about the river at night. Never walk along the bank alone. Never answer a voice you cannot see. And never, under any circumstances, look at the water after midnight. I broke all 3 before I turned 18. My family lives in a small town in the foothills of the Andes. The river runs through the valley like a scar, wide and slow in summer, fast and dangerous when the rains come. It has been there longer than the town, longer than memory, longer than anything with a name. And it has always been hungry. I was 17 that spring, walking home from a friend's house at 1 in the morning. The quickest path followed the river. My grandmother's warnings felt like old superstition, the kind of thing you believe as a child and dismiss as a teenager. I was thinking about the girl I liked and the test I had failed, and whether my father would notice the scratch on the car. Fog was rising off the water, thick and white, the way it always rises after a warm day meets a cold night. It curled around the tree roots and spilled over the path like slow-motion floodwater. That was when I heard it, a sound, far away, almost not there, so faint I thought it was a trick of the river, water spilling over stones in an unusual pattern. But it wasn't water, it was crying. Not the crying of someone hurt or afraid. This was deeper, older, the kind of crying that has been going on for so long. It has worn a groove in the fabric of the world. My body decided this before my brain did. The crying grew louder, or closer, or both. It was coming from the direction of the river, somewhere downstream, hidden in the fog. A woman's voice, broken, ruined, barely holding together, wailed into the night. "I miss Hijos, my children." The words were not spoken in any language I recognized, but I understood them perfectly. Every syllable, every shard of grief, they burrowed into my chest and made a home there. I should have run, I knew I should have run. But my legs had forgotten how. and my eyes were already searching the fog, looking for the source of the sound, looking for something I knew I did not want to find. And then I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the water, maybe 50 yards downstream. A white dress, long and wet and dragging in the mud, dark at the hem where the river had stained it. Her hair hung past her waist, black and tangled, dripping as if she had just climbed out of the water. And her face was tilted up toward the moon that was not there, toward the sky she could not see. I could not look away. She began to walk, not toward me, along the bank, parallel to the water, her bare feet leaving no prints in the mud. And she kept crying, kept wailing, kept calling for children who would never answer. Then she stopped, and she turned her head. Her neck rotated too far, much too far, the way an owl's turns, the way nothing human should be able to move. And I saw her face for the first time. It was not a face, it was a wound, a howl carved into flesh. Eyes that were nothing but dark hollows, a mouth frozen open in eternal scream. Skin stretched so tight across the skull that every bone was visible beneath. And her eyes, those dark, empty sockets, they found me. She began to move toward me, not walking, the way fog flows, the way water flows. One moment, she was 50 yards away, and the next, she was at the tree line, and the next, she was less than 20 feet from where I stood. Her arms reached out, long arms, too long, the arms of something that had been stretched beyond breaking and had not broken. "Miss Hijos," she cried, and the sound hit me like a physical force. Grief so pure, so absolute, that it made my knees buckle. She was close enough now that I could see the detail of her dress. The tiny river stones caught in the fabric, the way the water dripped endlessly from her hair, even though she was no longer in the river. And I could smell her wet earth and decaying leaves and something sweet underneath, like funeral flowers. She reached for me, her fingers stopped inches from my face. I could feel the cold radiating from them. Not the cold of winter, but the cold of deep water, of river bottoms where sunlight never reaches. "Where are my children?" she whispered, and her voice was inside my head now, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. And then my phone rang, the most ordinary sound in the world. A stupid pop song I had set as my ringtone months ago and forgotten to change. "Frimpos, 1.0, she recoiled. 2.0, she screamed. Not grief this time, but rage. A sound like glass shattering underwater. And she dissolved. Not walked away, not vanished. Dissolved. Into mist, into shadow, into the fog that swallowed the riverbank whole. To pause 2.5, I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. And I collapsed on my grandmother. Sporch, shaking so hard I could knock on the door. Frimpos, 1.5, she opened it before I could, as if she had been waiting. Pause 2 point. Oh, she looked at my face for a long moment. Then she looked past me toward the river, toward the fog that had followed me all the way home. And she shook her head for pause. 1.0, you saw her. She said, it was not a question. Pause. 2.0, it was La Llorona, she continued, pulling me inside. The weeping woman, she was a mother once, a mother who drowned her own children in that river, centuries ago before the Spanish came, before anyone remembered, and now she searches forever. Suppose 1.5, she will never find them, my grandmother said, because they are not lost, they are hidden from her by something older than her, something that will not let her rest. 2.0, she mistakes the living for the dead. If she had touched you, if that phone had not rung, she would have pulled you into the water and held you there until you drowned. And when she realized you were not her child, she would have kept searching, and your ghost would be searching too, forever. 2.5, I did not sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. 2.0, I moved away from the river a year later to the city, where the only water comes from taps and the only fog comes from factory vents. Pause 2.0, but on warm spring nights, when fog rises from the drainage canals and the streets go quiet, I still hear her. Distant at first, then closer, a woman crying by the water, looking for children she will never find. And sometimes I swear I feel cold fingers reaching for my shoulder in the dark. She was wearing a white dress, and she was soaking wet in the middle of a drought. That was the first thing that should have told me something was wrong. But it was 2 in the morning. I had been driving for 6 hours, and the fog on Highway 50 was so thick I could barely see the white line in the middle of the road. When you are that tired, your brain stops asking the right questions. I was coming back from my brother, sweating in Nebraska. Long drive, longer weekend. And I had stayed later than I should have, because I didn't want to be the first one to leave. You know how it is. Family obligations and open bars, and the quiet dread of going home to an empty apartment. Highway 50 cuts straight through the flatland, cornfields and cattle ranches and towns, so small they don't appear on GPS. At 2 in the morning, in thick fog, the world shrinks to the 20 feet of asphalt, illuminated by your headlights. Everything else might as well not exist, and then she existed. She was standing on the shoulder of the highway, one arm raised, thumb out. Out. A classic hitchhiker pose, except for the fact that she was in the middle of nowhere wearing a white dress that looked like it belonged at a summer wedding. The fog swirled around her like it was attracted to her, like it was part of her. I pulled over. I don't know why. I'm not the kind of person who picks up hitchhikers. I've seen too many true crime documentaries for that. But something about her made stopping feel like the only option. As if my hands on the steering wheel were not entirely my own. She got into the back seat without opening the door. I didn't notice that until later. She got into the back seat without opening the door. "Thank you," she whispered from the darkness behind me. "I've been waiting a very long time." Her voice was faint, like a radio station almost out of range. And it was wet, if a voice can be wet. The way your voice sounds when you have been crying for hours. When your throat is raw and your words come out soaked. I asked where she was going. She gave me an address. A road I didn't recognize, maybe 30 miles ahead. Then she went silent. I drove. The fog got thicker, the kind of fog that makes you feel like the world outside your car has been erased. Like you're piloting a spaceship through an ocean of nothing. The heater was on full blast. It was October and the nights got cold on the plains. But the car would not warm up. My breath started to fog the inside of the windshield. I wiped it with my sleeve, but it came back faster each time. That was when I noticed the water. There was water pooling on the back seat floor mat. Not a little. A lot. Enough that it was starting to seep toward the front. And it smelled, not like rain, not like tap water, but like a lake, like standing water that hadn't moved in a very long time. I looked in the rearview mirror. She was sitting perfectly still in the center of the back seat. Her dress was clinging to her body, wet fabric pressed against wet skin, and water was still dripping from the hem. A steady rhythmic drip that I could hear over the engine, over the radio static, over the pounding of my own heart. Her face was pale, not the pale of someone who avoids the sun, but the pale of someone who has spent a very long time underwater. Her eyes were open wide and fixed on the back of my head, and her lips were blue. "The bridge," she said. "You need to slow down for the bridge." I hadn't seen a bridge. I hadn't seen any sign for a bridge, but I slowed down anyway, and 300 yards later, my headlights caught the metal railing of an old concrete bridge spanning a narrow river that the fog had swallowed entirely. How did you know that was there? I asked. No answer. I looked in the mirror again. The back seat was empty. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded on the damp road for 30 feet before stopping, and I twisted around in my seat, heart hammering, hands shaking, expecting to see, I don't know what, a joke, a woman laughing at my fear, but the back seat was empty, completely empty, except for the water, a dark, spreading stain on the fabric where she had been sitting, and on the floor a small pale object that hadn't been there before. A flower, a white lily, the kind you see at weddings and funerals. I drove the rest of the way to the address she had given me. I don't know why. I could have turned around. I could have found a motel and waited for daylight and convinced myself that exhaustion had played tricks on me, but I needed to know. The address led me to a narrow dirt road, then a gravel path, then nothing. A dead end at the edge of a lake. The fog was thinner there, just enough to see by. The water was black and still, no houses, no lights, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. Just reeds and silence and the smell of still water. Pause. 1.5. I got out of the car. Phone pause. 1.0. My flashlight swept across the lake shore, and I saw it. Full pause. 2.0. A wooden cross. Fin pause. 1.0. Small, white, tilted at an angle, half sunken in the mud at the water. Sedge. Fin pause. 2.0. There was a name painted on it. The paint was old, peeling, faded, but still legible. Twin pause. 1.5. Emily Vance. 1.0. 1.0. 1995. Swan 2016. Point pause. 2.5. The date of death was October 12th, 2016. Phone pause. 1.5. It was October 12th that night. 2.5. I drove home at 30 miles per h-hour. Flashers on, gripping the wheel. So tight my knuckles went white and stayed that way for 100 miles. 2.5. The next morning, I searched the name, local newspaper archives, small town obituaries. It took me 2 hours to find it. 2 pause. 2.0. Emily Vance was 20 years old. She had been driving home from a wedding on October 12th, 2016, wearing a white dress, the article noted, because she had been a bridesmaid. Her car had gone off the bridge, the same bridge I had crossed that night. It took the divers 3 days to recover her body. Full pause. 2.0. The article included a photograph, a high school yearbook picture, a young woman with pale skin and dark hair, and a shy smile. Pause. 1.5. On her lapel, a white lily. A white lily. 2.5. I never drove Highway 50 at night again. Full pause. 1.5. But every October, when the fog rolls in and the nights get cold and the roads get empty, I check my rearview mirror more often than I need to. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear a whisper from the back seat. A voice like a radio station almost out of range, asking if I've seen her family, if I know where she's supposed to go. 3.0, and I always answer. You are home, I tell her. You are home now, because I don't, to know if she can hear me. But I hope, I really hope, that she can.